In this video, we'll look at mergers and acquisitions. So when we look at mergers and acquisitions, there's actually an article that was written by Roger Martin that's what do you need to get right with regard to mergers and acquisitions. And Martin says that what we should be doing or what companies should be doing is to look for ways to do what? To add value. So that's almost antithetical to what we normally think of when we think of mergers and acquisitions is how are we going to extract value? But Roger Martin says to look for ways that we can add value to that acquired company, look for better ways to provide growth capital so that the company can expand, look for ways to provide better managerial oversight that you as the acquiring company can provide better management practices to that acquired company. Look for ways that you as the acquiring company can transfer valuable skills to the acquired company. And then as well, look for ways that you can share valuable capabilities. So what is this looking to do? It's looking to be inclusive. It is looking to grow the particular new entity as it was, and to make that new entity bigger and better by providing that growth capital, providing that managerial expertise, providing valuable skills that can work together to make 1 + 1 to be equal 3, as well as sharing those capabilities. So what should companies try to accomplish when they have a merger or an acquisition? And so the first one is increase revenues. I also have cost savings. So cost savings is important, but what we find is that cost saving is not the key. A lot of times people say, oh, we want to acquire this new company so that we can save X amount of money. Yes, X amount of money is important, but what should be the greatest reason is to increase the revenues there. As part of increasing the revenues, what does acquiring a new company often give? It often gives you that access to a new market, to a new technology, or to new intellectual property. And so again, what is it that we're trying to do? We are trying to increase our markets so that we can increase our revenues. We hope to have greater market share and to have what? Some operational expertise, research and development for a particular part of the business or a particular new area of the business that perhaps we as the particular acquiring company did not have. But again, looking to acquire this expertise in hopes of what? Increasing the revenue. So revenue is the key. Diversification of product and service offerings. So having another product or another service that does what? That fits in well with the other products and services. So it becomes a very tight mesh there. And as well, integration into the value chain, be it from the if it's the primary source, if it is the secondary source, or if it's the tertiary source. So again, that primary being raw materials, the secondary being manufacturing, the third being services there. So that value chain being the inbound logistics, the operations, the outbound logistics, being the marketing and sales, or being the after sale services. So you're looking as well to integrate that particular chain so that you can do what? You can acquire those revenues that the previous level had or the subsequent level had when we're looking at integration into the value chain. and as well to reduce your financial risk. So to spread out that risk among the various products. But the key that we see is that increased revenue is why one company should want to acquire another, to believe that you're going to be able to have that increased revenue. However, what we do see as well is that there is the huge potential for strife when it comes to acquisitions. There could be a difference in culture, for example, a difference in management systems. So with regard to that culture and those management systems or that management philosophy, you could have one company that is a very innovative, risk-taking type of company that has got a very flat organizational structure that is perhaps a differentiator, and that perhaps even a younger workforce, for example, people coming into the office with flip-flops and shorts and playing pool and ping pong during lunch and having lots of snacks and all of these sorts of things, versus a company that's very staid. A company, when I first started at Mobil Oil, it was suit and tie. We had to wear a suit and tie every day. It was in Dallas, Texas. It was hotter than Hades. And we were told by email in June sometime when it was not required to actually wear a tie. And then we were told back in probably September, I think, when tires were required. So those cultures there may not mix. Again, the model, the business model, is it a cost leader? Is it a differentiator? What is the structure, the hierarchy like? Those can be incompatible systems. And as well, what could be a problem that you dilute your company's brand due to overestimation of the synergy. So you think that you're going to be able to have all these revenues. You think that you are going to be able to cut your costs. You think that you're going to be able to do all of these things. And it's because there is a lack of understanding, perhaps, of what is the acquired company's business model, what is the acquired company's culture, what is the acquired company's business, how is the acquired company actually making its money, who are its customers, what are its processes. And so what is can be the final outcome there. So the destruction of shareholder value and the decrease in the stock price of the transaction, or what's worse, from our Tower of Babel here, is just a complete destruction, bankruptcy of the company. So those possible catastrophes there, that merger or that acquisition, if it fails, if it is not successful, what do you have? Possibly you've got mass layoffs. You've got a huge negative impact on the brand's reputation. And because the brand's reputation is going down the tubes, you've got a decrease in brand loyalty. What does brand loyalty means? How many people are actually buying your product? So now you had this many customers and now you're getting this many customers, or maybe your customers bought this much and now they're buying that much. So that brand reputation, that loyalty there, leads to a loss of revenue, may lead to an increase in cost. So now you're trying to assume all of those costs from dealing with dealing in the difference in that business model, dealing in the difference of how that company acquires its customers or what its business processes are. And so then what can be the ultimate catastrophe is that permanent disclosure of the business. When we look at some unsuccessful mergers, Roger Martin says that 70 to 90% are abysmal failures. That means maximum of 3, right? They're 3 out of 10, but really it's probably 1 out of 10. that is successful, and we've got 7 to 9 out of 10 that are unsuccessful. So what are some examples there that are cited? In 2001, America Online bought Time Warner for 165 billion with a B dollars. The very next year, they lost $99 billion because they had to write off the goodwill of AOL. And then, I beg your pardon, they had to write off the goodwill of buying Time Warner. And then what did America Online do? That in 2015, they sold the Time Warner for 4.4 billion. So what did they do? They bought it for 165 billion, and then 14 years later, the sale is now what? From 165 billion down to 4.4 billion. In 2005, Sprint acquired the majority stake in Nextel Communications for $35 billion, billion with a B. And so what happened? 3 years later, Sprint is writing off $30 billion due to an impairment of goodwill. So that goodwill, what is goodwill? What is goodwill? Goodwill is the difference between what a company pays for another company's assets that are fair market value, or I guess book value, net book value, fair market value, but the difference between what a company is paying for another company's assets and what those actual assets are worth. And so if those are not the same, then that difference there is called goodwill. And so what is happening? Sprint there in 3 years says, look, that goodwill is no longer there. That $30 billion probably, I hope it's more than goodwill, but it says that they have a, in our example, in our readings, that they wrote off $30 billion due to the impairment of goodwill, meaning that those assets, that extra money that Sprint had paid for those assets, just for the good name. What is goodwill? It's the good name. That good name has vanished. In 1994, what did Quaker do? It bought Snapple for $1.7 billion. And in 27 months, so that's less than 2.5 years. In less than 2.5 years, Quaker sells Snapple for 300 million with an M. So they buy it for 1.7 billion, sell it for 3 million. So it's a loss of $1.6 million per day that Quaker owns Snapple. Other unsuccessful mergers, Google and Motorola. Google buying Motorola for 12.5 billion, and then they sell it 2 years later to Lenovo for 2.9 billion. 2011, Hewlett Packard buys Autonomy, which is a European data analytics company, for $11 billion. They sell it 1 year later. And what does HP do? They end up writing $8.8 billion. So they're selling it for, they're only getting less than $3 billion for what they had paid $11 billion for, and that's in 1 year. However, not every merger is unsuccessful. So what do we have? We have some examples here of successful mergers. We have Disney and Pixar and the Marvel acquisition. So in 2006, Disney buys Pixar for $7.4 billion. And so what were some of the movies there that came out of the Pixar? So the animation, Finding Dory, Toy Story 3, WALL-E. So that's got $1 billion in revenue. So in 2009, Disney bought Marvel Entertainment for $4 billion. And the 11 Marvel movies brought in $3.5 billion since that acquisition. Google in 2005 bought Android for $50 million, which allowed it to compete with Microsoft and with Apple. And so in May of 2018, the over half of the US smartphone, the owners of the US smartphone were Google Android, use Google Android. Now that does not say what is the profit of the industry, but it says what is over half of the actual physical phones there were using Android instead of iOS or another platform. when I worked for Mobil Oil, so Mobil was the second largest. Exxon and Mobil merged in 1998. And since then, the investors had quadrupled their money and shares had gone up 293%. So we see that obviously not all mergers are bad. However, what does Martin say? It says 70, he says 70 to 90% of the mergers are absolute abysmal failures.